Power is a difficult topic for many people because it's difficult to observe in action unless you see somebody in a senior position exercising authority through the management hierarchy. But it's also pretty critical to the way that organizations work. And the other reason it's difficult is because it's associated with politics and game playing, and that's what I call the negative side or the dark side of power. And a lot of people therefore don't want to think that they have to get involved with being powerful. But if you think about it, power is the means by which organizations and individuals get things done. So we can't really think about leadership without understanding power and how power is used. A typical way of thinking about power relates to the various forms that it takes and which attach to a particular individual. And in this module, you can look at those in relation to your own position. So, for example, you can say an individual leader has legitimate power, which relates to their organizational position, their authority. You can say that they have expertise, and that's a form of power. Or you can say that they have referent power, which relates to their personal likability or status. As important of what sorts of power you've got is how you actually use them. And effective leadership is a combination of what sorts of power you have and how well that you use those forms of power together. Broadly speaking, I think that people can be said to be using power well when they use it astutely. In other words, not all the time. They don't throw their weight around, they don't bully. They use power strategically in order to get things done, and they use power without alienating or upsetting others unnecessarily. In other words, they build alliances and sustain the allies that they've got. Very typically, power that's used effectively links to the application of strategy or the focus on the purpose of the organization. In other words, what you're doing there is using power to get the right things done. And therefore, power is reinforced by a strong sense of you're using that power legitimately. It's also important to understand that power may not be used in a very visible or explicit way. For example, very powerful people may be able to control the agenda or agendas that an organization discusses. They may be able to control the way resources are allocated. They may be able to control the sorts of choices that are made or are not even considered because of their power, and yet it's not explicitly being used. An example of how power may not be visible or that there are power struggles inside organizations relates to one that I saw in a very large confectionery company many years ago when I was working with them, where the marketing department wanted to change the packaging on a particular very, very well-known product. But the production department simply would not do this because they said it was too expensive and too difficult. The two departments went backwards and forwards for several years before the chief executive had to intervene and say that the marketing department won. But it's a classic case where power struggles occur in organizations and may not be visible for many years until somebody else challenges them and a difficult decision has to be made. So far, we've really talked about power at the individual level, but then started to think about it at the departmental or organizational level. Generally, what we can say is that power at the organizational level tends to reside in those particular departments or business units who either control valuable resources or can solve critical problems for the organization. So if you think about it, one of the reasons why finance tends to be a very powerful area in most organizations is because they control a valuable resource. They control the allocation of finance, and usually they can solve critical problems such as where is that finance coming from? Again, if you think about it, the power of sales derives from the fact that they are close to customers and therefore they can generate sales and money for the organization. That's where their power comes from as well. Conversely, less powerful departments or parts of organizations are usually those which aren't critical to the core production or the core areas of the organization and aren't necessarily solving critical problems for that organization. So we've looked at individual and organizational power, and we're going to look a little bit more at that. And then we're going to look at influence. If you want to share your opinions, click on the poll.